I have tried rewriting the script a few times now, and every time I get into it, it turns extremely negative and critical due to the nature of the 9.1.0 patch. I don't like being mean, and I even try making light of negative situations, like how I can't enter chase normally, so I let the Knight's Guards do it for me, even though that bug has been fixed now. Every time that I do end up digging into the problems with this recent patch though, it always comes back to one singular question: why do we have the PTB? To give you a knee-jerk answer, it feels like it's all just for hype moments and aura, which is effectively useless in delivering on a finished product. Oh, it's so hyped that we have The Walking Dead in the game now, or that we have Springtrap in the game, but it's never actually properly utilized otherwise. Hello, this is May the Deathslinger main. Friends and long-standing members of this community will know that I have held a personal disdain for Dead by Daylight's public test build, or PTB. The very existence of the PTB itself is a blessing to have at all, since it does allow us to provide feedback on potential changes coming to the game, and it allows us to drum up hype for new characters and perks. Most importantly, it provides us with the ability to report game-breaking bugs so that they can be rectified before they come to the live servers. In theory, and in some applications, this is a good thing. But in practice, the PTB is a miserable experience that seems to have little practical bearing on the finalized version of the game. At the time of writing, I have a full-time job that occupies 10 to 11 hours of my day, leaving me very little time to record, edit, and upload my videos. In the sense of saving time and my computer's components, I cannot afford to download a fresh install of DBD or leave my computer running while it installs DBD that offers zero progression. And with my current internet speeds, the PTB takes around 2 hours to download, while I generally have 3 hours in the evenings to myself on a work night. And since I've never found the survivor side of this game all that interesting, I mostly play Killer and have made a small career out of it here on YouTube and of course Twitch. This means that I would like to test killer changes in the PTB, but every time a new killer is released, killer queues are excruciatingly long, and my full-time job does not allow me the time to make proper videos on these changes. During the Springtrap PTB, the only reason I was able to get footage was because I was unemployed at the time, and because I had a couple of community members that were willing to help me run around in a custom match for an hour. When I went on to record my opinions on the killer, I took 2 hours to complete 3 matches, one of which I didn't even use as background footage because the entire survivor team left pretty much immediately. Even if the killer queues were better in this last PTB, the lack of leaver penalties pretty much guarantee that someone will disconnect. This server is effectively a complete waste of my time. I don't have the time to dedicate to my regular job, and this, especially if it takes this much time to get into a game that the other side willingly abandons, all for zero meaningful progression. Your BP doesn't carry over, your add-ons aren't saved, your teammates leave constantly, and queues are awful if you want to try any new stuff for yourself. Oh, but hype moment, you get to play as Purple Guy and 2 characters from that TV show you like. And the PTB highlights one consistent flaw in behaviors balancing philosophy that irks me to no end: that everything receives a compensatory change. Something gets buffed, another thing gets nerfed to compensate, and vice versa. Something gets nerfed, another thing might get buffed to make up for it. These specific changes impact killers more visibly since their power and playstyle can change greatly based on what numbers are adjusted. Now let's take Deathslinger for example, where the buffs he received in the 8.0.0 update made him less clunky to play without add-ons, and because of these changes, he had remained a solid middle-of-the-pack character. The same goes for Dredge and Nemesis, as they received their changes to make their kits a little more manageable. Survivors, on the other hand, only receive changes when new perks are added or when the base game is modified, which, ironically, impacts killers as well anyway. I'm bringing this up now because I'll be talking about Killer a lot, not just because I'm almost an exclusively Killer player myself, but also because the biggest changes outside of perks are often towards killers themselves. Nobody is putting survivors into tier lists that aren't memes or comp players trying to min-max stealth, I guess. In the Walking Dead PTB, 3 killers were adjusted: the Pig, the Clown, and the Knight, while the Executioner received a substantial rework to his add-ons. The Pig was, surprisingly, buffed in every aspect of her crouching ability. She crouched faster, her tear radius dissipated quicker, and her dash attack both activated quicker while moving. For all intents and purposes, this is a good change for what has been known for being a chronically low-tier killer. The changes do make her more of a threat in chase, but she still has to play around the same regular conventions of the game. And with a character that has been seen as so weak for so long, we can't imagine that these changes push her into the oppressive tier. She's just more of an active threat now in chase and short short loops. But in order to compensate for these buffs that gave her a functional active power, the add-ons that are related to it were nerfed into near obsolescence. Twitter user AfroM1 pointed out that while the dash gives Amanda 16 meters of distance, the add-on Last Will that had its dash duration value nerfed on the PTB from a 33% to a measly 3% adds a negligible amount of extra distance in the PTB variant. Afro also followed up on their original tweet by suggesting that Pig's dash is locked to only last for 2.2 seconds, alleging that the distance that she can clear only increases if her speed is increased as well. Now that'll be something to test out later, but regardless, choosing to nerf the add-ons to make up for the fact that an underperforming killer has a functionally okay power limits her add-on and build diversity. Previously, you had to choose between Trap Spam, Head Pops, Permacrouch, or Extend a Lunge 3000, but now that diversity has been ruined because the add-ons that facilitated playing with different parts of her power are obsolete. Last Will, John's Medical File, Workshop Grease, Combat Straps, all components of their own unique playstyles, all now effectively dead weight in the inventory of any Pig player. With the Clown, Behavior wanted to encourage people to use yellow bottles more, so they made yellow bottles a lot stronger and then nerfed purple bottles to compensate. The purple bottles were nerfed so badly in comparison to how much the yellow bottles were buffed that all that anyone is encouraged to use now are the yellow bottles, which doesn't really fix the strengths or weaknesses of the killer, it just shifts his annoyances laterally. With the Knight, some much needed quality of life changes were added to the base kit, but to compensate for the killer feeling more intuitive to play, Behavior tried to nerf his ability to send guards on long patrols. In their reasoning, they wanted the Knight to not rely on pincer attacks with his guard as often, while failing to realize that this forced him to be completely reliant on making those pincer attacks. On the PTB, it was not worth the cooldown timer to send a guard on a long chase to aid in the global passive pressure that this killer offers. Whenever the Knight has a survivor spending 3 minutes in the ring with the jailer, it frees up the most time for him to focus his basic attacks elsewhere, but he sacrifices his ability to have a power in chase. When the survivor can retrieve the banner in a fraction of the time that they could before, the Knight has to babysit his power constantly in order to get value out of it at all. Between the Clown and the Knight, neither of these killers really needed to have nerfs added into their kits because they were already on the weaker side, and having a straight buff in the PTB would have been perfectly acceptable in my mind. If the goal was to encourage swapping between Clown's bottles to get use out of both of them, then why put in the effort to make one aspect completely unappealing? I thought that the goal of the PTB was to test changes, so I'm confused as to why the positive aspects that would make them objectively better aren't left as the only changes on the killer. Sure, the Pig with her new dash, plus 33% on Last Will, might have been insane, but that would be a point of data to help inform what values to adjust later down the line. It is called the public test build for a reason. We should expect things to feel overpowered and unfinished because we are testing to see what needs to be changed before it makes it to live servers. But by making so many simultaneous changes, it is impossible to pinpoint where exactly everything went so wrong. Does the Clown really need that much haste and that quick of an activation time run as yellow bottles? Well, we'll never really know how strong it is in a vacuum, even though it is extremely strong, because Clown players are simultaneously reeling from the changes that were made to the purple bottles. Would the Pig be so overpowered if her add-ons hadn't been adjusted? Probably, given that Bamboozle and Crouch mode is almost always a free hit at Shack if the survivor runs back for another loop, but we'll never know because too many things were changed all at once. What ends up happening is that these proposed changes, or even untested changes in the case of the Clown, are often nixed before they even make it to the live servers. Now, it's good that some of these changes never went to live servers, like Artist proposed add-on adjustments that received widespread backlash from the community a little while ago. And with a similar level of backlash being received for the proposed changes to the aforementioned killers, I can't imagine a world where the current changes that they have put to live actually stand. But here we find ourselves in a catch-22. If future changes do go through to undo what has already been done, a non-significant portion of the player base will be unhappy and possibly leave the game shortly thereafter. And if they are completely reversed, then the time that was collectively spent on the PTB amounts to nothing. That's wasted development time on creating a semi-stable testing environment to experiment with said changes. The constant backpedaling, while definitely necessary, communicates a lack of confidence and competence, all of which could be generally avoided if they didn't make so many changes all at once. I'm not saying that the team is incompetent themselves, and I know that game development is far beyond my pay grade. That much I can respect. For the sake of not being clipped out of context, I am saying that their actions communicate incompetence. If they straight up buffed one aspect and buffed the living hell out of one killer and clearly stated that we will make mandatory adjustments when the killer reaches live servers, that would be fine, because then we'd know that the public test beta is a test of ideas and concept. I'll repeat myself here, but if the idea for the clown was to make him less reliant on purple bottles and to make both an option for clown players, why not buff the underperforming side to test changes first to best highlight the vision for the killer, and then make the informed changes afterwards? It makes no sense to me. Potential killer changes and missed opportunities aside though, the most annoying and largest indicator of how useless the PTB feels is how they respond to bugs. In late 2023, I got my first exposure to a limited time event in the form of the Halloween event. In it, Behavior introduced the Fog Crystal item, which was buggy because it made killers incapable of starting a chase for the rest of the game. They were introduced again the following year, and the community's outcry was as uproarious as before. Then, earlier this year, they were brought back for a third time during the 2v8 event, and it still had the same bug. At this point, we're all thinking, alright, it was fine because it was a limited event item, until it was added as a permanent item in the 9.1.0 PTB, where the same fucking bug kept happening. And I thought that such a massive oversight would have surely been fixed, since it was a known bug for over a year and a half, and since it was being added to the base game. When it hit live though, the same bug persisted alongside several other frankly amateur mistakes for a game as significant as Dead by Daylight. In this patch alone, I have encountered voice lines, specifically screams that were recorded for Rick Grimes and Daryl Dixon, were very clearly not recorded by Andrew Lincoln and Norman Reedus. Michonne's voice lines are cut incorrectly, and you can hear staff commenting on the VA's performance. Voice lines for the new characters are not balanced correctly and can be heard at max volume irrespective of distance. Rick's perk, Last Stand, makes you invulnerable to any and all killer interactions during vaults once it's activated. Chase doesn't start or starts randomly, meaning that 0 perks that require Chase to activate, such as Play With Your Food, Distortion, or Quick Gambit, also will not activate. Now, this bug has been fixed after I wrote this segment out, but it's not totally fixed. Sometimes Chase still doesn't start, and because of this, the pig can perpetually hound someone with their hat, and the counter for their hat will continue to go down even while she's right behind them. Streetwise instantly refreshes item charges and adds them infinitely each time a medkit or toolbox is dropped into a chest. And Jim is here, and while I don't mind Jim being here, he's not supposed to be here right now. This is only the list of bugs that I currently know of that came in with this patch. Alranican has compiled several more on this Twitter thread, which I'll link below, and Linksy, a well-known Twins main, has a list of bugs that started playing the Twins specifically with this patch. As far as I can tell though, none of Deathslinger's bugs have been addressed, aside from the AC vents on RPD East, and I'm sure that goes for most other killers too. Every killer in this game has a bug list of some kind, some of which have been around for a really long time, and to see those go ignored while more clearly avoidable bugs the community has mass reported still managed to make it to live servers really makes me wonder why we even have the PTB to begin with. To me, the fact that so many of these problems are verifiable in so many rights really makes me wonder what we're actually doing with the PTB outside of wasting everyone's time. Ah! I got hit validated! No! Come on, man! I literally got hit validated! What the f— A lot of people have also wondered why killers like the Nurse or the Blight have remained as strong as ever, with the last stat changes to them being made in 6.5.0 and 5.0.0 respectively. Yes, the last time that the Blight received a nerf outside of bumping his terror radius to 40 meters was over 4 years ago. My assumption, more of a tinfoil hat theory really, is that Behavior is trying to maintain a status quo in regards to overall kill rates, and that Nurse and Blight fall into this status quo across all skill levels. Reaching even further, Behavior might see the average kill rate for a killer and decide that Nurse and Blight are, decidedly, not problematic. My anecdotal belief is that many new players might try Nurse, since she is one of the killers that come with the base game, and not perform particularly well because she has a rather steep skill floor. Once people are over that skill floor though, she becomes an absolute terror, but her relative dominance and bizarre gameplay might make her less enticing for people to play long term. In return, a lot of people who find themselves in the higher skill brackets are either looking for a different kind of challenge or straight up don't like playing Nurse because of how often people give up against her. The teams that don't give up against Nurse know the exact counterplay to her, and so her kill rate goes down again. This is all conjecture and hearsay from what I've encountered in the greater DBD community, but my inductive reasoning leads me to believe that new players or experienced survivors collectively drive her kill rates down. Veterans of the game find her boring and don't play her much nowadays, hence the reason why the sample size for higher MMR might be narrower, and due to her relative difficulty, the killer remains in the same state so as to not completely alienate people that are new to the killer. And I think something similar can be said for Blight, though he seems to be a more popular killer, so my theory could be completely bunk. Either way, while Nurse and Blight might have a tapering off, killers like the Artist have a very small but extremely dedicated and lethal group of players. A user by the name of Slender Killer on Twitter has a website where she hosts a list of all player-submitted Prestige 100 players. You can sort this by either killer or survivor, but the most important thing to know is that she updates the website based on user submission. There are only 43 Nurse players listed, which doesn't include either Super Elf or Lachlan, two Nurse main content creators that I know of. Comparatively, there are 164 Deathslinger players, including me, and 68 Artist players listed. I don't believe that there are fewer Nurse P100s versus Artists, and that this instead indicates that the people who are dedicated to playing Artist are proud of their achievement, as they should be. And this ties back into my theory by highlighting how the dedicated Artist player base knows their killer inside and out, driving her kill rate into a range that causes someone at behavior to ring the nerf alarm for her add-ons. That's also what I think happened with the Clown and the Knight. Killers that don't maintain the status quo receive changes in ways that feel like massive oversights because they genuinely are, and then they never get tested properly. But that's just a theory. A game theory. Anyway, I hope some of this makes sense and that the PTB is used to individually test changes instead of spending time making sweeping changes that have a history of being reverted constantly. That's all I have for this one. Safe travels, and goodbye.